Yeah, it's Mindset Cafe, we all got that mindset. Gotta stay focused, never settle for less. It's all in your head, how you think you manifest. So get ready to rise, cause we about to be the best. Gotta switch it up, gotta break the old habits. Get your mind right, turn your dreams into habits. No negative vibes, only positive thoughts.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Cafe podcast. It's your host, Devan, as always. And today we got a special guest. We got Erik Allen with us. He is the host of the Erik Allen Show, which is ranked, in number 133 in the U.S. on the Apple charts for his podcast. And he helps men realize that their past and other people's opinion of them doesn't really define their future. So I wanted to make sure to bring him on today and get his perspective, because at the end of the day, the Mindset Cafe is all about perspective. Erik, so thank you so much for coming on today and taking time out of your day.
Oh, bro, Devan, thank you so much for having me on, man. It's truly an honor to be here, man.
No, so let's dive in. I know we're diving in on a little bit on your podcast, but I want to start off, how did you get started with everything in terms of like how you're helping men, how you've been featured on, numerous things, from the NASDAQ to dropping bombs with Brad Lee to, so many things. What was your entrepreneurial journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been entrepreneurial minded. I think, from the early age of 18 doing to like Amway conferences and things like that. I always tried to figure out how can I go and side hustle and get money and things like that. But for me, entrepreneurship is kind of been this thing that I've always just gone after. And I've had times where it was eating like king and times where I was eating like top ramen, and it's just one of those journeys that is up and down as a typical entrepreneur. But I think where the mindset comes into play is in those low moments for me, where I just was like struggling to get that next sale or struggling to get through the next kind of thing that I was pushing for. For me, it falls back onto my faith with God. Like, man, I know that God provides. And even in those low moments, if I just have the patience and just the realizing that he will provide, man, for me, that's what got me through those days. But I think as entrepreneurs, if we can deep dive into what we're passionate about, and I think if we can figure out that's what our purpose is, man, is where we can step into that and we can realize that our past and other people's opinions of us does not define our future. Man, we step into that. That's where we can start making an impact and realizing that, look, there's other people that have maybe gone through similar stories of ours. And if we can share our story, it can help inspire them to maybe take a step into their future, their entrepreneurship journey, man.
Oh, that's awesome. And that is so true. What led you into like that coaching role? What was that first realization that you wanted to help other people?
For me, it was podcasting. I started podcasting having no idea what I was doing. I was in a walk-in closet for probably the first 100 episodes. And I had a 100-foot extension that ran around the bed in my bedroom into the walk-in closet. Like, it was hot as heck could be in there, right? Like, no camera, no lighting. I mean, really bad camera, like just using the laptop one, right? But I think the more conversations that I had in the podcast world, I was talking with entrepreneurs, world changers, and success-minded people. And I've been blessed to speak with guys like Mylett and Brad Lee and Tim Story and just massive names on there. But I think the more conversations that I had, it really started inspiring me to step into my own journey as an entrepreneur. Man, not everybody can relate with David Meltzer losing $100 million, but we can relate to his journey back up and building back up to that and saying, man, no matter what I lost, I can build that back up. I'm still alive. I woke up today, my eyes opened up, and still that means that I've got an opportunity to go make an impact. And so the conversations that I've had through podcasting, it's inspiring to myself. It's motivational to myself to be able to connect with those guys. And what they talk about is tactics and, man, being able to just step into our purpose. And that's what has motivated me in my entrepreneurial journey, man. And just to continue to fight for my family and be able to provide for them, man. And so I think it all falls back onto podcasting.
No, that's awesome. And before I ask the next question, I want to ask, like, what led you, because you've been podcasting for a while, what led you, to take that jump into podcasting?
So I started a company in 2012 called Top Rated MMA. It was an MMA apparel company. And this is back in the day where tap out was like everywhere. And I thought, man, if I just put out some tap out type shirts, man, I'll make some money. And so we launched this Top Rated MMA at an event and did really well to start. Our name kind of took off. in regards to like getting a lot of followers on Twitter at the time. I think we got up to, close to 10,000 followers globally. And then about 2 years in, I got really bored with the apparel side of stuff, but I was like, man, I still really am intrigued by MMA. I want to talk with MMA fighters. And so I started the Top Rated MMA show. Again, not really knowing what I was doing, but my question to them was, why do you want to get in a cage and get punched in the face? And I ran that show from 2017 to 2021. I did 256 episodes of that show. But in the middle of that, in 2019, I launched the Erik Allen Show. I had the idea to talk with entrepreneurs, world changers, success-minded people, like I said. And I use that same question of like, as an entrepreneur, why do you want to get punched in the face? Because that's what we do as entrepreneurs. We get punched in the face, but we keep going. And that's how I got into the podcasting space. Was I just wanted to continue with MMA, being involved in that, and then interesting stories that they bring, because every fighter has this different mentality as they get into the cage or reason for stepping into the cage, man. And so that's what really started it all.
No, I mean, that's awesome. We actually have a like-minded, past. I used to do MMA, and I was an MMA coach, but I actually started an MMA clothing company, more of just like a, for fun thing on the side. It's called Short Fused. That was my little step into the entrepreneurial space as well. So that's funny that we have that similarity
for sure.
So what I wanted to ask you earlier, with you going through those experiences and you having these conversations, one key thing that you said was that not everyone can relate to, losing $100 million, right?
Yeah.
But you can relate to having a big loss or, losing money and how it felt. And I think that's a huge note, because people don't necessarily take the actual nugget from what is happening in someone else's life, and they just see what the actual thing is for it, what it is. Like $100 million. Well, I don't know what that feels like, so I can't relate. It's like, well, have you ever lost someone? Have you ever lost, money? Have you ever, so I think that perception and that perspective change and allowing you to relate and connect with someone is huge. And I think that's an underused tool that, people need to focus on.
Yeah, man, for sure. One of the questions, if you listen back to all my shows, the very first question I ask everybody, even from, Bradley to Tim Story, like all of the top level people that I've spoke to on my show, I asked the same question. Tell me about where you grew up and what was childhood like for you. The reason that I asked that question is because we were all kids once. And these guys made decisions to get to where they're at today. They might have hit a loss as a kid. They might have had a great childhood. They might have had a horrible childhood, but they all made decisions to get to where they're at. And we all grow up. We're all kids once. And so I just want to ask that question, because that's what we can resonate with. Man, they were kids once too. They might have went through a loss. They might have lost a dog or a family member, but then they made the choice to get out of that and step into their purpose, man. And so it's so important to just go, yeah, they might have, hundreds of millions of dollars, but they were kids once too, and they decided to step into that purpose.
No, exactly. That's huge. That's amazing. So with your podcasting, with, your coaching and stuff, how is your relationship, or how has the journey been with, you mentioned your family, and that's one of those things as an entrepreneur, you said earlier, it's like getting punched in the face and we keep going forward. But also one thing that we start to forget, or we tend to forget, that our family tends to go through it with us.
Yeah.
Right. So how has that journey been for your family and your support system with them?
It's been an interesting journey, because I think especially a couple years back, where now I'm not a full-time entrepreneur. I still work a full-time job, but I do podcasting. I love the entrepreneurial mindset and things like that. But there was a moment a few years back where I just thought, I want to do whatever it takes to be a full-time entrepreneur. And I went out to an event called Prosperity Camp. It's put on by a guy named Greg Reed, who was on my podcast, and he wrote the book it was a follow-up to Think and Grow Rich. But it was called 3 Feet from Gold. Amazing book. But anyways, he invited me to this event. I didn't know anybody. I had really very limited funds. I flew down to California on air miles. I stayed at the cheapest, most ghetto Motel 6 that I got warned not to stay at. But I was like going to just do whatever it took to get down there. And I get to his house, and there I met this guy named Kelly Cardenas. Dreadhead guy, like super cool dude though. And he invited me down to the beach to go watch the sunrise. He said, let's go read our Bibles and watch the sunrise on the beach. Now, I'm from Idaho. We don't have a beach, but I'm like, heck yeah, let's step into it. But I remember this moment. sitting down, talk with him that morning. And I said, man, I just want to be a full-time entrepreneur. And he looked at me and he goes, Erik, you're at this event where you have people that have millions of dollars. He goes, and they have great businesses, but how many of them have great marriages? And it was like this wake up call for me to start changing my priorities and start working with my family more. And so it has been an interesting journey, but my wife is fully supportive. I've had some great conversation with her around like my dreams and my purposes and what her dreams are. And I want to be able to combine those into the business and just be open with them.
No, I mean, that's amazing. So what's your 9 to 5 right now? Like, what are you doing with that? And why haven't you made that official jump to just go full-time entrepreneur?
I think for me, I haven't quite gotten to the point where I've been consistently making the income that I want on the part-time basis. Now, if I wasn't married and didn't have kids, like I'd be like, hey, I'm just going to go all in and I'll take my savings and put it into a business and stuff like that. But having a family, I do have to kind of look at that and go, I'm not willing to take the risk of stepping away from a salary at the moment when I don't and put my family at risk. You know, I have to pay the bills. I'm a solo income earner. I've been able to keep my wife home for the last 13 years. And so I have to think about that risk before I step in. But I think for me, I've enjoyed the journey of being, I would say, a part-time entrepreneur. And is it a dream of mine to go full-time? Yeah, absolutely. But for me, I need to make sure that it's a consistent basis, or this like almost stepping into it where I can get some good wins right off the bat that can kind of set me ahead. Now I'm licensed in insurance and things like that. So I do that on the side as well, but I'm all about trying to, step into that full-time role. But for me, I have to sit back and go, okay, I'm a solo income earner. I can't just stop the income right now having a family. No,
I think that's smart. And with today's day and age and social media, I know a lot of people get that like mislead where it's like, to be an entrepreneur, you need to make that full jump and just do it. And that's not the case for everyone. Right.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And it's one of those things where, you're doing it the smart route and you're building up the business and building up your entrepreneurship. And then when it makes sense that you can make a transition, it'll almost be seamless and it won't be painful. You won't have to go through that, that rut where you're kind of just scraping everything together for, months or even a year or two. Right. So
yeah,
there's no wrong way in doing it. I think that's where people get misled on social media about entrepreneurship, that you just there's only one way and just dive in. Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I get it. My route will be much slower than somebody going all in and just stopping their income and going all in. And I just don't believe in debt. So people are always like, oh, put it on your credit card to buy this course and that stuff. And I have zero debt. I don't need to, my cars are paid off. I have zero debt. And so I kind of like that feeling. And so I don't want to just go right into debt and then go, man, sorry, family. Like, we're going to eat top ramen for the next 3 months. I gotta be a little bit smart on that stuff too.
No. And I mean, that's smart though. Right. And again, there's no one path to entrepreneurship. There's no one path to success.
Yeah.
And people think of these get rich quick schemes and stuff like that. And you got to realize that business is an finite game, right? Or an infinite game, right? So if you're only thinking of it as I'm going to make $1 million and that's your last goal, it's like, well, what happens after that, right?
Yeah.
Business doesn't end just because you hit one goal.
Yep.
So whether your journey takes an extra year, extra 5 years, at the end of the day, like you'll still get there, right? And as long as that's what you want and you're pursuing. So I think that's huge, and it's not a knockoff, your entrepreneurship belt whatsoever. It's a smart route. And you have a huge thing saying that, you have no debt as well. A lot of entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs can't say that, right?
Right.
So that's huge. With your goal of going, full-time entrepreneur in the future, what would that look like? Would it be more for the coaching side, more for the entrepreneurship, or is there something you're going to blend together?
Yeah, I think it would be a combination. For me, I'm very passionate about podcasting, and it does generate income for me from paid sponsors and things like that. It's not like, write home letter type money, but it pays all the podcasting bills and things like that for right now. But I think for me, increasing the income and the revenue from my podcast would be huge. And then also jumping into speaking. So I started doing public speaking about a year ago and started training myself, going through Toastmasters, which is an amazing group. If you don't know what Toastmasters is, it's awesome. It's like $150 a year to be part of it, but you get trained in real feedback right there in public speaking. And that helped me prepare for a speech that I gave in March of this year in front of 120-ish people. I spoke for 25 minutes on mindset. And man, so I think for me that future entrepreneurship looks like, podcasting, being a speaker, and coaching people on launching podcasts. That's what I do today is I help people create, start, launch, and run successful podcasts. And how do they book those big names, right? That's what I coach them on.
Oh, that's awesome. So what was the mindset shift that you had to go through, or the mindset hurdle that you had to overcome, going from, podcasting is one thing, right? Having this kind of conversation in person or online, it's a certain style. But then when you go into even face-to-face coaching, it's, again, there's different perception on it. And then going to speaking on a stage of 120 people, what was that like self, overcoming like realization that you had to have?
Man, that was a big one for me. So I got asked to be part of that conference about 6 months in advance. And so I had never spoke more than 5 to 7 minutes prior to that, longer. And so I just thought, man, I'm going to do this. So I started writing up the speech. I actually hired a couple of speech coaches to help me through the process of putting the speech together, make sure my outline and what my talking points were there. And man, I practiced that thing for, 2-3 times a day. I probably said it 180 times before I got up on that stage. And so when I got up on the stage, I felt very confident getting into it. Of course, I got cotton mouth 2 minutes into the talk and was like, trying to figure out what's going on. But man, it felt good to step out and get that, I would say, that first win out of the way. I was able to build a little bit more confidence getting up there and talking. Of course, I like review the video and go, oh man, I wish I would have done this or said that differently. Right. But I think we're always our harshest critic. But for me, that was that moment, that breakthrough moment for me. And mentally, I mean, people saw me like before I stepped on the stage, I was in the back of the room, just like walking from one side of the room to the other, just going, all right, this stage is my own. I own the stage, like talking out loud to myself. They probably thought I was a crazy dude, but I got up there and I was like, dude, I am bringing the fire. And man, it just felt good to get up there, get the win. Had a lot of great feedback from people right then and there. And man, it fired me up to go do it again. And hopefully we'll continue to do that.
No, that's awesome. That's a huge accomplishment, as well as that's a huge hurdle most people can't overcome, is one, public speaking, let alone in front of a room of 120 people, right? Like you can't look over everyone's head at 120 people, right? You're gonna lock eyes with somebody.
Yeah.
So how I want to shift that from what you're doing next to, like, with you interviewing such big names and stuff like that, has that ever been like how basically the stage, of 120 people trips up a lot of people when you interview big names versus when you're interviewing, let's say, someone that's, just an entrepreneur, like maybe the same level as you? Do you feel that you have to basically psych yourself up for that conversation? How does that go for you personally?
It depends. So I think in the early days of podcasting, I definitely was more nervous to talk to folks. There was moments where I would be kind of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm talking to Ken Shamrock, right? Or I can't believe I'm talking to Ed Mylett. Like that type of stuff would come through my mind. So I used to work in the music business. So I worked for Universal Records in my early 20s, got to meet a bunch of rock stars, hang out with rock stars. And I think that was my first taste of really kind of being around these celebrity type people, these bigger, like bigger than life sort of people. Right. And so I kind of felt I've gotten past that a little bit, but then getting into the entrepreneur space, talking with these big guys, I am a little bit nervous. And for me, I gotta, take a couple minutes before I jump on and go, all right, God, I need some patience right now. Please just give me the right words, the wisdom, the knowledge, and give me confidence as I talk to these guys. And not everything is going to go smooth. And so, but I believe that, the more that you do it, the more that I've spoken, the more confidence that I gained. And there was a time where I had Ken Shamrock on my show. And I was talking with him, and I was using this platform called Ecamm, and I was probably, 70 or 80, 100 episodes in, something like that. So I was feeling pretty confident, but I had just switched to this new Ecamm platform, and it was basically allowed me to record the interview while he was on FaceTime on his phone, and he would get a phone call or a text, and it would shut off my recorder. And so I was 3 minutes in. I said, Ken, I'm really sorry. My recorder turned off. Can I just, turn it back on? He goes, yeah, no problem. And then 5, 6, 7 minutes go by. I'm talking with him, having a great conversation. I look down, my recorder is turned off at some point. I have no idea when. I'm like, this conversation is awesome and no one's going to hear it. And I was so like mad and frustrated at that moment that I was like, I just finished. I'm like, okay, cool. It is what it is. Well, 2 hours later, I had a conversation with Ed Mylett. It was already booked. I was like, this cannot happen. I have to be able to record this and have no issues with Ed Mylett. So that one I went into very, very nervous, like technology better work for me. It did. I was able to reschedule Ken's show for later and it turned out all good. But it was in that moment where I was like, dang it, man, what am I going to do?
So, but I think a huge thing, like you kind of just skipped over it like real fast right there was, did you reach out to Ken afterwards and let him know what had happened?
So here's what happened. His team actually reached out to me and said, hey, thank you for having Ken on your show. That was awesome. How did it go? And I was like, oh, well, I think, I was using a new platform. He got a text and turned off my recorder. I'm sorry. It's not going to be able to turn out. And I just felt, I was like defeated in that moment. I was like, gosh, dang. And I sent that to him. And the coolest thing happened like 10 minutes later. And I think it was his wife that was responding to my email, but she goes, hey, no problem. Let's just rebook him. And so I actually rescheduled and had him on the call. We did the same interview. This time it actually worked out. I used a different platform. Everything went smooth. And then in fact, a year and a half later, he reached back out to me and said, hey, I've got this event coming up. Can I come back on your show? And I was like, absolutely. So yeah, Ken's been on my show twice, but man, yeah, if his team wouldn't have reached back out to me, then I probably was too chicken to reach out to them and say it didn't work out,
See, but at the same time, you had that strength or that courage to at least admit that you had messed up on, and that it's not gonna, work out. You didn't try to blame anyone else. Like you're like, look, I'm using a new platform. This is what happened. And so them being, in an entrepreneurial space as well, right? Because they still are. Yeah. And they understand mistakes happen, right? Yeah. That's just the nature of the business. But if you try to play it off and act like everything's fine and you never produce the show, all of a sudden you would have never got that second, booking and, that relationship. So I think that's huge.
Yeah. You got to own up, man. When you screw up or mess up, man, you got to own up to it. And I think that's what makes us real and authentic when you're talking with these people that seem like they're bigger than life. Right. And I get them on the podcast and they're just normal people that just made the right choices. And, they went through mistakes just like anybody else. They just happened to keep going. Right. They didn't let their past and other people's opinions of them define them.
No, exactly. I know you got to run in a few. So I want to ask you the one question I like to ask everyone. Hypothetically, everything that you've accomplished, all the shows, interviews that you've done are, erased. You get basically one message to leave on, your legacy wall. What would that message be?
For me, the legacy wall is love people where they're at, man. Like it's not my job to judge anybody. I just want to love people where they're at. And if I can encourage somebody to just go, man, get out of that victim mindset. It doesn't matter what's happened in your past. Have the right mindset that you are better than that. You're better than your past. You can continue to go for it, and love people where they're at. Like I said, not my job to judge people. If people want to go and identify as whatever they want to identify as, that's up to them, right? As long as they're not hurting themselves or hurting other people, go do you, right? I just want to love you where you're at. And so I think if people just had this mindset of just loving people where they're at and not judging people, man, the world would be a lot better place.
That's awesome. I agree with that. I know people can find your podcast at the Erik Allen Show, but where can people connect with you on social if they want to learn more about like the coaching and speaking that you got going on?
Yeah, thank you, man. ErikAllenMedia.com. It's ErikAllen, media.com. And then on Instagram, it's just Erik G. Allen is my handle on there. Feel free to connect with me. That's probably the biggest platform that I use, but I respond to every comment, every DM. So if you have questions, definitely reach out. And excited to connect with people, man. And Devan, like I said, your show is awesome. People need to be listening to your show. I've been a big fan of your show for a long time. You and I, we spoke on the same sort of virtual stage with Philip Sessions a while back, man, and been a fan of your show. And people need to be listening to your show, man. You've got some amazing guests. You do an amazing platform here, man. And I appreciate you and truly an honor to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate you so much for taking the time out, and we'll definitely connect again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
No negative vibes, only positive thoughts. Just in the game of life, mindset calls the shots. Got my mind on the prize, I can't be distracted.